The heavy doors of the Alchemist Guild groaned under Caelum's forceful push, swinging inward to reveal the vast, shadow-enshrouded hallways of the once great institution. With the orb pulsing gently in his palm, Caelum stepped inside, his boots stirring dust that hadn't been disturbed in decades. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of old magic and decay. As he ventured deeper into the guild, the dim light from the orb barely penetrated the thick darkness of the corridors. Each step took him past long-abandoned laboratories and storerooms filled with broken equipment and scattered papers. The deeper he went, the more the silence seemed to press against his ears, punctuated only by the soft hum of the orb and his own steady breathing. Finally, he arrived at a massive vault door, its surface etched with both arcane runes and complex mechanical locks, a testament to the guild's mastery of blending magic with technology. Caelum set his backpack down with a soft thud, taking out the ancient tome he had taken from the shopkeeper. The tome's pages, filled with cryptic diagrams and spells, held the key to unlocking this door. He studied the locking mechanism carefully, tracing the connections between the magical and technological components. Pulling out a set of finely crafted tools, Caelum began to work on the mechanical parts first, adjusting gears and aligning levers with a skilled hand. Once satisfied, he turned his attention to the magical runes, chanting softly as he channeled energy from the orb into the symbols. With a final twist of a hidden dial and a loud chant, the locks clicked open, and the door slowly swung inward, revealing the guild's central repository. Inside, shelves upon shelves of ancient artifacts and forbidden tomes awaited him, their contents glowing faintly in the orb's light. Stepping into the vault, Caelum felt a rush of exhilaration. Here lay the lost knowledge and power of generations of technomancers, just waiting to be rediscovered. He carefully closed the door behind him, resetting the locks to ensure no one else could follow. With a deep breath, he prepared to explore the treasures of the Alchemist Guild, each step guided by the light of the orb and his own boundless curiosity. Inside the vault, Caelum was surrounded by relics and manuscripts that whispered of an age when magic and technology were one. The shelves were densely packed with leather-bound books, scrolls, and mechanical devices, each piece humming with latent power. The air was thick with the smell of oil and parchment, creating a heady atmosphere that made his senses tingle. He moved methodically through the rows, his orb casting light over forgotten technologies and arcane symbols. His focus settled on a particularly intricate device lying dormant on a central table. It appeared to be a kind of astrolabe, but with inscriptions and components that suggested it was used for much more than celestial navigation. Caelum carefully lifted the device, feeling the weight of its history in his hands. He placed it back down and pulled out a notebook, jotting down notes about its design and potential functions. His attention was then caught by a series of maps and blueprints spread across a nearby desk, detailing the layout of magical ley lines converging under Vorsha. As he delved deeper, he discovered a leather pouch tucked beneath a stack of dusty tomes. Inside were several crystal lenses, each etched with fine, almost imperceptible runes. Caelum held one up to the orb's light, watching as the runes glowed softly, indicating a latent magical function. Intrigued by the find, Caelum set up a temporary workspace right in the archive. He began experimenting with the lenses, placing them in different configurations around the orb. After several attempts and adjustments, he found a setup that amplified the orb's light, projecting it onto the vault's far wall. The light revealed a hidden alcove that had been concealed by an illusion spell. Pushing aside the heavy drapes that had disguised the alcove, Caelum found an ancient terminal, an amalgamation of alchemical etchings and mechanical gears. It was still operational, to his surprise. With careful hands, he activated the terminal, inputting sequences from the tome he carried. The machine whirred to life, screens flickering on with data streams that documented experimental spells, rare magical elements, and prototype technomantic machinery. This discovery was monumental. Not only did it provide Caelum with a treasure trove of technomantic knowledge, but it also held the secrets to innovations that could change the very fabric of how magic was understood and used in Vorsha. As he absorbed the wealth of information, Caelum knew that securing and understanding this knowledge was now his greatest responsibility and advantage. Caelum's absorption in the ancient terminal's data was abruptly interrupted by a chilling shift in the atmosphere. An ominous hum filled the air, a clear harbinger of activated defenses. Before he could react, the dark corners of the vast room began to stir with life. From the shadows, spectral figures emerged, materializing into formidable guardians programmed to protect the guild's deepest secrets. Their forms were an intricate mesh of ethereal and mechanical elements, each guardian radiating a cold, pale light. Armed with spectral blades that shimmered with a dangerous glow, they advanced towards Caelum in a silent, threatening march. With limited space to maneuver and knowing that physical confrontation would likely be futile, Caelum reached for the orb. His mind raced through the archives of spells and defenses he had studied, searching for something that could turn the tide in his favor. Remembering a fragment of a deactivation incantation tailored for guardian constructs, he spoke the first words tentatively. The advancing figures paused momentarily, their movements becoming sluggish. Encouraged, he continued, his voice growing firmer with each syllable as he channeled the orb's energy to enhance the spell's potency. As he uttered the final words of the incantation, the guardians halted completely, their weapons lowering as the magical command took effect. The air around them crackled with suspended energy, now harmless but still charged. With the guardians temporarily disabled, Caelum knew he had a narrow window to act. He couldn't permanently deactivate them without access to the central control system, likely embedded deeper within the guild's security network. His immediate priority was to gather as much information and as many artifacts as he could before making his escape. He moved quickly, scanning the room for the most valuable items, scrolls containing forbidden spells, mechanical devices with unknown purposes, and crystal cores pulsating with magic. Each artifact was swiftly and carefully packed into his bag, prepared for transport. The guardians remained still, frozen by his spell, but Caelum was acutely aware that his time was limited. As he worked, he kept one eye on the silent figures, ready to recite the incantation again should the spell begin to wear off. With his bag now heavy with ancient treasures, Caelum prepared to leave the archive. He knew that securing the vault and covering his tracks would be crucial to prevent immediate pursuit by the guild's modern-day overseers. The challenge of escaping with the guardians behind him was daunting, but the potential rewards of the knowledge and power he now possessed drove him forward into the dark corridors of the guild, ready to face whatever lay ahead. After neutralizing the spectral guardians, Caelum meticulously collected the remaining valuable artifacts and documents within the archive. With his pack securely loaded with ancient relics, he moved to seal the vault, ensuring no further intrusions could threaten the sanctity of the guild's secrets. He manipulated the controls on the ancient console, reinforcing the protective enchantments and mechanical locks that guarded the entrance. As the final glyphs glowed to signal the reactivation of the vault's defenses, Caelum felt a momentary relief. The archive was secure once again, its treasures safe from prying eyes. However, his work here was far from finished, and the weight of responsibility pressed heavily upon him. He made his way back through the maze-like corridors of the guild, the echo of his steps a constant companion in the otherwise silent halls. As he approached the guild's main entrance, the crystal communicator given to him by the shopkeeper pulsed with a soft, insistent light, a pre-arranged signal indicating an urgent message. Caelum paused in the shadow of a grand, crumbling archway and retrieved the small crystal from his pocket. Holding the luminescent stone to his ear, he heard the shopkeeper's voice, crackling with magical energy. "Be cautious. Regulators have been alerted to activity within the guild. An ambush is likely set at your usual exit. Use the south passage and return to the bookstore immediately." The message was clear and dire. The regulators, ever vigilant in their duty to control the flow of magical knowledge within Vorsha, were closing in. Caelum knew that evading them now was crucial, not only for his safety, but also to protect the information he had acquired. With no time to lose, he tucked the crystal back into his pocket and hastened his steps. He chose the south passage, a less frequented route that snaked through the underbelly of Vorsha, offering shadows and cover from the eyes of the city's enforcers. As he navigated the dimly lit tunnels, Caelum planned his rendezvous with the shopkeeper. The artifacts he carried with him were of immense power and potential, and every decision he made now could determine the fate of much more than just his own life. The journey back to the bookstore would be perilous, but necessary steps had to be taken to ensure the safekeeping of the guild's secrets. Caelum's hurried steps echoed softly through the dimly lit underpassages of Vorsha as he navigated his way toward the south exit, utilizing the labyrinthine routes beneath the city that few knew as well as he did. The deeper he went, the more the damp, musty air filled his lungs, a stark contrast to the sterile chill of the guild. The crystal communicator vibrated again, a brief pulse to remind him of the imminent danger. With heightened alertness, Caelum reached an older section of the Undercity known for its derelict infrastructure and sparse population, the perfect place for an ambush. As he approached a narrow choke point between two ancient, crumbling buildings, his instincts screamed a warning. Pausing, he scanned the shadows, the faint glow from his orb casting eerie patterns on the old brick walls. He spotted subtle disturbances in the dust and small, strategic placements of debris, clear signs of a recent presence. With no time to retreat, Caelum prepared for confrontation. He withdrew a compact device from his bag, a defensive artifact capable of creating a brief but intense magnetic pulse, designed to disrupt any nearby mechanical devices, or in his case, to serve as a makeshift shield. As he activated the device, several figures detached themselves from the shadows ahead. Regulators, cloaked in the standard dark uniforms, advanced with purpose, their own magical devices at the ready. Caelum recognized the insignias of high-ranking enforcers among them, a sign that his intrusion into the guild had drawn significant attention. The air crackled with magical energy as the first spells were cast, streaks of bright light aiming directly for him. Caelum dove behind a pile of rubble just as his magnetic pulse went off, the force of it scattering debris and distorting the trajectory of the spells. Using the chaos as cover, he retaliated with a series of his own spells, each carefully chosen for their incapacitating effects. A dense fog erupted from his fingertips, filling the narrow passageway and obscuring vision. Through the mist, he heard shouts and the confused clatter of scrambling regulators trying to regroup. Seizing the moment, Caelum moved swiftly, navigating through the fog with practiced ease. He employed a blend of evasion and direct confrontation, using both magic and the environment to his advantage. His goal wasn't to engage in a drawn-out battle, but to create enough distraction to make his escape. Breaking through the last line of disoriented regulators, Caelum emerged from the other side of the choke point, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't stop to look back, knowing that every moment he lingered increased the risk of capture. Sprinting now, he headed towards the lesser-known exits that dotted the Undercity, leading back towards the relative safety of the surface and the path to the bookstore. After evading the ambush, Caelum's rapid escape took him deeper into the shadowy maze of Vorsha's Undercity. His breath came in harsh gasps, the cold air of the tunnels biting at his lungs as he navigated through the interconnected passages. The sounds of his pursuers faded into the distance, but he knew better than to assume he was safe. The regulators were persistent and had resources he couldn't underestimate. He knew this part of the city well, a tangled network of old service tunnels and abandoned subway lines that few dared to traverse. Here, the echoes of the city's industrial past lingered in the form of rusted machinery and collapsed conduits. It was terrain that Caelum could use to his advantage, moving silently and swiftly, always keeping one step ahead of potential pursuit. Caelum paused briefly to catch his breath in the shadow of an old transit car, its once gleaming surface now dulled and graffitied. He pulled out the crystal communicator, checking for any new messages from the shopkeeper or signs of further regulator movements. The device remained silent, a small mercy in the relentless chase. Resuming his flight, Caelum utilized a series of minor illusion spells to cover his tracks. He conjured sounds of movement in opposite directions and distorted visual cues in the environment to mislead any who might be following. Each spell was a calculated risk, draining his energy but buying precious time. As he moved, Caelum planned his route to emerge in the market district, a crowded, chaotic area that would provide ample cover and opportunities to blend in. The market was always bustling, filled with vendors and shoppers, the air thick with the smells of street food and the cacophony of haggling. Emerging from an access point concealed behind a vendor's stall, Caelum stepped into the daylight, squinting against the brightness. He quickly adjusted his appearance, casting a subtle glamour to alter his features and attire, blending into the crowd as just another face in the busy market. With cautious steps, he navigated through the throngs of people, keeping his head down and his senses alert for any sign of the regulators. The market's energy was a stark contrast to the silent tension of the undercity tunnels, and for a moment, Caelum allowed himself to feel a flicker of relief. But the weight of the artifacts in his bag and the knowledge in his mind was a constant reminder of the stakes at play. Reaching the other side of the market, Caelum slipped into a narrow alleyway that would lead him back to the relative safety of the bookstore. His pace quickened as he neared his destination, eager to reunite with the shopkeeper and reassess their situation. The journey back had been fraught with danger, but Caelum was almost home, almost safe to plan his next move in the intricate dance of power and secrecy that was his life. Caelum's relief was short-lived as he exited the bustling market. The familiar buzz of the city around him did little to ease the tension knotted in his shoulders. He was close to the bookstore, close to a haven of sorts, but the threat of the regulators was ever present, their network extensive and their methods relentless. Navigating the narrow alleys that snaked towards the bookstore, Caelum remained vigilant, his senses sharply attuned to any signs of pursuit. He knew the regulators would not give up easily, especially not when they had been directly challenged. Every shadow and every sound seemed suspect, and he moved with cautious speed, blending as much as possible with the environment. Suddenly, a faint drone buzzed overhead. Caelum glanced up to see a surveillance drone sweeping the area, its cameras likely scanning for any sign of him. Ducking under the cover of an overhanging balcony, he pulled from his bag a small, wrapped device, a signal jammer. Activating it, he disrupted the drone's communication, buying himself a few critical moments of invisibility. As he continued his escape, the communicator vibrated against his chest. It was another warning from the shopkeeper, advising him that a team of regulators had been spotted near the bookstore, possibly setting up a perimeter to catch him upon arrival. Caelum's path had to change. Heading directly to the bookstore now would be too risky. With quick thinking, Caelum diverted his route towards the city's old canal system, a less monitored area that provided cover with its network of bridges and overgrown banks. As he moved, he used his surroundings to his advantage, weaving through construction sites and across courtyards, always keeping structures between himself and the possible angles of surveillance. Despite his efforts to remain unseen, the regulators were coordinating, their net tightening as they deduced potential routes he might take. Caelum heard the distant shouts of agents communicating positions and orders to cut off escape paths. His heart pounded with the realization that he might be trapped, the freedom he so fiercely guarded slipping through his fingers. Reaching the canal, Caelum ducked into a maintenance tunnel, its dark, damp confines offering a momentary respite. He needed a plan. Fast. Reviewing the layout of the city's underground systems in his mind, he plotted a circuitous route that would loop back towards the bookstore from another direction, hopefully throwing the regulators off his trail. Emerging from the tunnel, Caelum blended into a group of city workers, his disguise spell altering his appearance once again. With meticulous care, he navigated the last stretch towards the bookstore, each step calculated and deliberate. The stakes were high, and there was no room for error. Caelum's journey back to the bookstore was a tense weave through the less traveled veins of Vorsha. With the regulator's persistent pursuit echoing behind him, he opted for a serpentine route that doubled back on itself several times, using the city's intricate layout to his advantage. As dusk began to settle over the city, casting long shadows down the narrow alleyways, Caelum's steps became more cautious. He utilized a blend of minor illusion spells to mask his presence, casting faint noises and misleading visuals in his wake to confuse any followers. Each spell drained a bit more of his energy, but the need for secrecy outweighed his growing fatigue. Reaching the vicinity of the bookstore, Caelum paused in the shelter of a dimly lit doorway to survey the street. The area appeared calm, but appearances in Vorsha were often deceptive. He pulled out the crystal communicator, sending a short, encrypted message to the shopkeeper. Approaching from the west. Watch for signals. Silently, he counted the seconds, waiting for a response or a sign that it was safe to proceed. After a tense moment, the faintest flicker of light blinked from one of the bookstore's upper windows, a coded acknowledgement from the shopkeeper. Heart slightly eased, but still vigilant, Caelum made his final approach. He stuck to the shadows, his movements a quiet dance between light and darkness. As he neared the bookstore's rear entrance, he scanned for any signs of regulators or traps that might have been set in his absence. The back door was subtly marked with a small, almost imperceptible rune that Caelum had insisted on as an extra layer of security. It glowed softly under the touch of his hand, indicating no breaches. He entered quickly, locking the door behind him with both physical and magical seals. Inside, the bookstore was a fortress of stacked books and clutter, the air heavy with the scent of old paper and magic. The shopkeeper emerged from the shadows of the back room, his expression a mix of relief and concern. "They've been circling the area since you left," the shopkeeper whispered, leading Caelum into a hidden basement that served as their emergency meeting room. "We need to talk strategy. Your findings have stirred more than just the usual bureaucratic hornet's nest." As they descended the narrow staircase to the basement, Caelum felt the weight of the situation settling around him. The documents and artifacts he had secured were more than historical curiosities. They were catalysts capable of altering the very fabric of their society. Now, more than ever, he needed to be strategic about his next moves. Once securely inside the bookstore's hidden basement, Caelum and the shopkeeper sat down at an old, scarred, wooden table littered with various magical artifacts and ancient texts. The walls were lined with shelves crammed with books, some of which contained secrets not meant for the uninitiated. The dim light from a single overhead lamp cast long shadows, adding a sense of gravity to their clandestine meeting. Caelum began the debriefing by carefully unpacking the artifacts he had retrieved from the Alchemist Guild, laying them out on the table. Each item was wrapped in cloth imbued with dulling spells to mask their inherent magical signatures. As he revealed each piece, he explained their functions and potential based on his preliminary tests and the information he had gleaned from the archives. The shopkeeper, whose knowledge of arcane lore was extensive, listened intently, occasionally interjecting with insights or suggesting references to specific volumes within the bookstore that might contain further information. The collaboration was efficient, their mutual respect for each other's expertise facilitating a deep dive into the strategic implications of each discovery. Among the items was a small, intricately crafted device that Caelum believed could be key to deciphering a particularly complex magical algorithm that had been used by the Technomancers of the Guild. This device, coupled with the blueprints and manuscripts he had secured, could potentially unlock new methods of energy manipulation that had been lost to time. As they discussed, the shopkeeper brought out a map of Vorsha, spreading it on the table. They began plotting points where the ley lines intersected, areas that Caelum had identified as significant from the Guild's records. These points, they hypothesized, could be crucial in amplifying the city's latent magical energies, provided they could be harnessed correctly. The conversation then shifted to the immediate threat of the regulators. Caelum shared his encounter during the escape, detailing the tactics and resources the regulators had deployed. It was evident that they were dealing with a highly coordinated and well-informed adversary. The shopkeeper nodded gravely, suggesting they increase their surveillance countermeasures and possibly recruit additional allies from his network of contacts within the darker corners of Vorsha's magical community. Finally, they discussed the potential need to relocate some of their more sensitive operations to a new, undisclosed location. The bookstore had served well as a base thus far, but with the regulators' growing interest, the risk of remaining there was becoming untenably high. By the time they concluded their meeting, they had formulated a multifaceted plan involving further research, strategic alliances, and enhanced security protocols. Caelum felt a renewed sense of purpose, tempered by the enormity of the task ahead. As he repacked the artifacts, he knew the coming days would test their preparedness and resolve. But the path forward was clear. They were not just preserving old secrets. They were about to breathe new life into them. In the quiet of the bookstore's basement, with plans laid out and strategies formed, Caelum and the shopkeeper shifted their focus to immediate action. The artifacts and documents had been analyzed and understood. Now it was time to secure them and prepare for the inevitable confrontation with the regulators. First, Caelum addressed the need for enhanced security. He and the shopkeeper decided to create several decoy repositories around the city. These locations would be equipped with non-essential documents and harmless artifacts, designed to mislead the regulators and buy them more time. Caelum prepared these items carefully, applying aging spells and minor magical signatures to make them seem authentic. Next, they prepared the real safe house, a location undisclosed even within their most trusted circles. Caelum used a combination of ancient warding spells and modern magical defenses to secure the site. Only he and the shopkeeper knew of its existence, ensuring that the most sensitive materials were protected from any who might seek to use them for their own ends. To communicate securely, Caelum set up a network of encrypted crystal communicators, similar to the one he used during his escape. These devices were distributed to a select few allies, each chosen for their loyalty and their ability to aid in their cause. The network was designed to provide real-time updates and coordination without risking interception by conventional magical surveillance. Recognizing the need for more robust alliances, the shopkeeper reached out to his network of informants and allies within the darker sectors of Vorsha's magical community. These were individuals and groups disenfranchised by the current regime, each with their own grievances and desires for change. Meetings were arranged discreetly, with Caelum and the shopkeeper negotiating support in exchange for access to some of the less sensitive discoveries. As the final preparation, Caelum revisited the collection of artifacts and documents, organizing them for quick deployment or study. He knew that each piece might hold the key to significant power shifts within Vorsha, and he prepared several contingency plans for their use. Whether as bargaining chips or as tools of warfare, he was ready to leverage the full potential of his discoveries. With the night deepening around them, the shopkeeper and Caelum reviewed their preparations one last time. They were set to face the challenges ahead, each step meticulously planned and every resource poised for use. As they ascended from the basement to lock up the bookstore for the night, there was a sense of grim determination between them. The game of power and secrecy was on, and they were now major players, ready to shape the future of Vorsha according to their design.